Dillian Whyte has called out MMA fighter Francis Ngannou, who fights in the UFC, I believe. This is his Wikipedia page. Big guy, says he's ranked, number 2 in the UFC heavyweight rankings. Dillian Whyte was asked in this interview from March 25th if he would fight in MMA, UFC, and he said absolutely. Dillian Whyte has actually fought in MMA before. I think he was like 18 or 19 years old. There used to be a video clip of it on YouTube, but I can't find it anymore. I can find video clips and whole videos of Dillian Whyte when he used to fight in Muay Thai, but I can't find that old clip of him fighting in MMA. But he definitely did have an MMA fight. He says it in this interview, and I actually saw the fight. He knocked some guy out in MMA many, many years ago. So he says he'd like to try MMA again, UFC. He called out this particular individual. He says that he would like to have one boxing fight in, I'm not sure if he wants to have the boxing fight in a boxing ring, in a boxing setting, or have the boxing fight in an MMA cage, but one boxing fight basically, and then one under MMA rules. Now, Dillian Whyte didn't have an extensive MMA background, but he did have an extensive kickboxing background. And that should serve him well if he decides to go into MMA, because it's good that he's got a number of different skills. You know, he can do leg kicks and all that kind of stuff. Although he was a lot lighter back then when he used to fight in Muay Thai. He won't be as mobile now, I wouldn't have thought, as he was when he was 18, 19 years old. And does Dillian Whyte really practice any kind of martial arts at the moment? He does boxing, obviously, but in terms of Muay Thai, in terms of grappling, does he practice any of that? I know that his quote-unquote brother, Dean, is a guy who practices jiu-jitsu, and I think he actually competed at a fairly decent level. I'm not sure if that was pro or amateur. I think it was amateur, competed at a fairly decent level. So maybe Dillian is used to wrestling around with him and doing jiu-jitsu with him and stuff like that in the gym. So perhaps he is one of those boxers who could transition over to MMA and actually be quite successful at a high level. We haven't seen anyone do it yet. In terms of, off the top of my head, Shannon Briggs had a go in K1 and he actually knocked some guy out fairly quickly. Not sure if he had a go in MMA as well, but he definitely fought in K1. And K1 is, well, is K1 MMA? Maybe it is MMA. It's Japanese kickboxing, but the rules to me are a little ambiguous because I see all kinds of crazy stuff going on in K1. And other than that, Ray Mercer, of course, fought in the UFC. He lost to Kimbo Slice, but he also fought another guy. Was it Tim Sylvia he fought? I think it was Tim Sylvia. He fought another guy in UFC and he actually knocked him out. I'm not sure whether that was boxing rules or MMA rules, can't remember. James Toney obviously got embarrassed in UFC when he fought Randy Couture many years ago. That fight didn't last very long. He tapped out. And as I say, several boxers have been into the cage, the MMA cage, UFC or other MMA promotional companies, but most of them haven't done very well. Would Dillian Whyte be any different? See, the thing is, when you're a professional boxer and you're earning the kind of money that Dillian Whyte is earning, when you're at the peak of your powers, in your prime, crossing over to MMA is risky because if you get beaten easily, it kind of diminishes your star power, even back in boxing, because there's this whole boxing versus MMA thing, right? And it's all about the public perception. So if the public perceive you to be a great fighter, then to see you get taken out easily, that might diminish your market value in boxing and diminish the respect that boxing has in general if you've actually got a guy in his prime going over there. Because those other guys I mentioned, like James Toney, Ray Mercer, etc., they weren't in their primes. They were seen as washed up even in boxing. So when they lost in MMA, it didn't really mean much. Not that many people were watching what they were doing. Do you understand what I'm saying? But if Dillian Whyte into MMA, a load of people will be watching. So it's risky from that perspective. It's also risky in terms of injuries. Because in MMA, you can pick up different types of injuries. In boxing, yeah, you got to worry about training and hitting stuff and whatever. And in the fight itself, you can get a fractured eye socket, bust ribs, obviously bruised face. But in MMA, you could get a dislocated shoulder. You know, it could snap your wrist or do anything to you, you know? There's all kinds of different injuries you could get in MMA because of the fact that they are allowed to grapple and get you in choke holds and all kind of submission holds. So that's another thing to think about for any boxer who wants to go and pursue that particular avenue. But just as a fight fan in general, somebody who likes to see the best fighters of any discipline and find out who can beat who, I'd like to see Dillian Whyte in MMA, truth be told. I think there's probably boxers who would do better than him, but I'm sure there's boxers who would do a lot worse than him. The main thing is seeing a fighter going over to UFC in their prime. And I'm talking about a boxer in their prime, not some past it guy who used to be good years ago, but somebody who's still relevant now, who's still good now, in their prime going in there. I'd like to see if it's any different than a guy way past his prime. And particularly with Dillian Whyte, he's got some MMA experience and obviously Muay Thai experience. So anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Dillian Whyte in the UFC, do you think it will ever happen? Out of all the fighters right now, all the boxers, who do you think would be most likely to make that crossover? Another person potentially could be Jarrell Miller. I know Anthony Joshua's talked about trying MMA in the past, but maybe he'll surprise me, but I don't really see it. He doesn't have a background in martial arts as far as I'm aware, unless you consider boxing a martial art. Some people do. So I can't see it with him, but Jarrell Miller is somebody who has a martial arts background since he was a young kid. So he also potentially could cross over into MMA and, maybe do something. I mean, if he manages to pop dirty again in boxing, he might have no other choice other than to cross over into MMA, but we'll see what happens there. Hopefully he'll be a good boy and not take a whole pharmacy for his next fight. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's happening out. I've got a free podcast up on Patreon today for any of you to go listen to. It is a shortened version of a full podcast, which I've done for paying members on my Patreon. And it's about the current predicament that we all find ourselves in by way of health and this mass house arrest that we've all been put under. So in today's Patreon podcast, I have gone into extensive detail with a tremendous amount of research and dozens of research links for any of you to check out. You will, if you're a critically thinking person, appreciate what I've done there. And as I say, check out the free version. If you like what you hear with a free version, consider signing up for a membership. It's just £2 a month, the equivalent of $3 a month in US money. There's no commitment. There's no contract. You can cancel at any time. And there is a whole heap of content there, which you can listen to, including my Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series and just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of other podcasts about all types of different topics and what have you. And I also do regular live streams on my Patreon. So if you want to holler at me and have some interaction, then check out my live streams. One of the issues of doing live streams on YouTube is that there's so many people in the chat box. You're talking about hundreds of people at a time, sometimes 1,000 people in the chat box. It's impossible to get to even a fraction of the people's comments. And it's far less likely that I'll actually read your comment doing a YouTube live stream. But if you're with me on Patreon, there's far less people on the live streams. And after I do the live streams, they're also uploaded as MP3s for you to download on the Patreon app and listen to at your leisure, or just listen to it, live through the app. Listen to it, on the app, and you have the option to download it as an MP3 through the app. So anyway, check me out on Patreon today. It's about this current situation we're all in, the house arrests. It's business. We're all making the most of it. So check me out in there. The free version is available for anybody to listen to. And if you like it, consider signing up for the no commitment £2 a month Patreon membership. All right, it's happening. I'm out.